So the US dollar accounts for 60% of all known central bank foreign exchange reserves. So banks around the world, the central bank of different countries, they hold foreign reserves. Effectively, the strength of their currency is backed very much by how much foreign reserves that they hold. The foreign reserves that they hold will be composed generally of the same 5 currencies that are in the IMF basket of currencies. There may be some exceptions. There are some special situations. I would imagine Scandinavian countries hold each other's currency in there. Maybe New Zealand holds some Australian dollars, things like that. There are probably, very specific relationships that some countries have, like maybe the Central Asian republics also hold rubles in there. But as a rule, the 5 IMF currencies are held in central banks, and in the whole world, the US dollar accounts for 60% of all of those reserves. The euro is number 2, and it accounts for about 20%. Now, I need a drink of water. When I first started doing China research, so I was in China and I was working in China. I was a university professor, and I was studying for China MBA. And then I went on and I did postdoctoral studies in economics and all this. And during that time, I was doing a lot of work on the Chinese economy. And there was so much talk in 2013, 14, 15 about Chinese economy is going to dominate the world. They're taking over the world. The Belt and Road Initiative was launched. Xi Jinping is going to restore the glory of the great Chinese empire. They're going to displace the United States as the world leader. They're going to be the richest country in the world. They're already number 2 now. When Donald Trump was elected president, the inauguration was held in January, so he couldn't attend Davos, the World Economic Forum in Davos that year. And there were all these reports that Xi Jinping was the star of Davos, and everyone wanted to hear Xi Jinping, and they all wanted to talk to him, and the Belt and Road, and everybody's excited, and this and that, and I have to tell you, I was a little bit frightened. I was a little bit scared. I thought, wow, China's really winning this global race, And the deeper I got into my research, and then I'm working for a Chinese think tank, and then I'm doing economics research for School of Economics, Shanghai University. We would get these dictates that would come down from the central authority, would come down, and they would say, this week we want you to research we want you to write positive stories about the Belt and Road Initiative. Positive stories about the Belt and Road Initiative. And then we would go off and write stories about how, some merchant in Tashkent or someplace is better off because of the Belt and Road Initiative. I started realizing that these stories were feeding into this narrative that China was winning. And I don't know that China was winning. And they actually probably were winning in 2013, 14, 15. But then I started doing 2 sets of research. One was the one I was told to do, and then the one that actually had all the facts, including the negative ones. And what I started seeing was, for the Belt and Road, for example, I was seeing these big projections. 87 gazillion billion dollars, Belt and Road, and they're going to give this much to Vietnam, and they're going to give that much to, Central Asian republics, and they're doing this and that in Pakistan. And I started realizing these were projections, and the GDP numbers were projections, and how much it's going to earn over a period. But it wasn't real. I mean, it wasn't what was actually happening. What was actually happening, China really was going on the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars, loaning this money out to these countries at exorbitant rates of interest in some cases pushing them into debt crisis, because the GDP increases were projections. We're going to loan you this much at interest this year, but it's going to increase your GDP by that much in 5 years, so you'll be able to make your debt payments. Yeah, but the debt payments are real. Debt payments were real. It was a percentage of the debt that had to be paid every year. The GDP was a projection. And in a lot of these cases, they started the projects. They go, well, when we complete this project, it will generate X amount of GDP. Not only was it a projection, but it was when we finish this project. Well, a lot of those projects were never finished, but the money was loaned. We loaned you this much to start the project. We're going to start the project, and then we'll loan you more money, and then we'll finish the project. A lot of these projects were never finished, which means the GDP never materialized, but the debt did. Anyway, this is what I was seeing from the inside, and I wasn't allowed to write about it or talk about it in China. And I started writing a lot of papers for the Foreign Policy Journal in the United States because I wanted to be able to speak my mind. Anyway, what I was seeing was the reality was diverging from the narrative. China was not winning. And the IMF, that was the big one. When the Chinese yuan got accepted into the basket of currencies in the IMF, everyone was saying, oh, that's the end of the US. They're going to displace the dollar and all that. Okay, as of 2018 in the world, as of 2019, right? As of the fourth quarter of 2019. So that's just, last quarter, basically, 2 quarters ago. In the entire world, 217 billion worth of yuan are being held in central banks. $217 billion. Now, that's a lot to you and me. That is almost double my annual salary. No, it's a lot of money, right? Okay, compared to what? Compared to US dollars, 6.7 trillion. Okay, there's no comparison at all. I believe that the percentage works out to 1.9, I believe. I believe it's just under 2% of all central bank foreign currency holdings are in yuan. Okay, so if China's going to take over the world, they're going to displace the dollar. I don't know when they're planning to do it, but they're certainly not doing it now, and they haven't done it at any point up until now. In the world, just to give you an idea of the strength of the US dollar, there is 1,671 billion, which I guess in US language is 1.67 trillion US dollars in circulation. About half of that is in circulation outside of the United States. The reason why there's so many dollars in circulation is because almost all commodities are priced in US dollars. Oil is priced in US dollars. 80% of global commerce is done in US dollars. The US dollar accounts for 90% of the total forex trading that's done in the world, the total foreign exchange trading that's done in the world. 90% is into or out of US dollars. Okay, this is the strength of the dollar. The yuan is nothing compared to it. Is a speck. It is a grain of sand on a mighty beach. Almost 40% of the world's debt is issued in US dollars. Now, in the US, there are self-loathing Americans and some media that I don't know why, they hate the US, so they always want to find something horrible to say about the US. And if I were to say in front of those people, 40% of the world's debt is issued in US dollars, they would understand that to mean the US, that the US debt is like 40% of the global debt or something like that. It's not. Debt is issued in US dollars. This means foreign countries issue debt in US dollars, including China. Why do foreign countries issue debt in US dollars? Because nobody wants to hold debt that's denominated in Togo money units or in RMB. The biggest market, there's a huge market for Chinese yuan denominated debt. And you know where that market is? It's inside of China. Very few people outside of China want to buy Chinese government sovereign debt and hold it. Nobody wants that. Okay, so they issue it in US dollars. During the global financial crisis, it was discovered that non-US banks held $27 trillion of international liabilities that were denominated in foreign currencies, and out of that, 18 trillion was in US dollars. Okay, so more than half of the total international debt that was issued in the world by other countries was in US dollars. So now let's get to this threat, this looming threat of China dumping US debt. First of all, China holds $1 trillion, just over $1 trillion worth of US debt, US dollars. One of the reasons why they do that is to back their own currency. Their own currency is backed by US dollars. In fact, their currency is pegged to the US dollar. It's not 100% pegged. It's what's called a floating peg. Is that it's pegged to the US dollar, but it's allowed to fluctuate, plus or minus X percent. Now, Donald Trump, when he was running for president, kept calling China a currency manipulator. What he was saying was China intentionally manipulates the currency down to make their currency worth less, and this way their exports will be cheaper for people to buy abroad. China was definitely a currency manipulator at one point. Today, it is questionable. Most economists feel they are not actually a currency manipulator today. It's a debatable point. We could do another video on it. Okay. It's not a point that I feel is very important to debate. The president, I still hear him say it once in a while. I don't know that it's the best thing to say right now because there's enough economists saying that it's not true. But what is true is that the Chinese currency is effectively pegged to the US dollar, and it's allowed to fluctuate plus or minus a certain percent. The agreement that China has, or the statement that they've made, is that each year they're allowing it to fluctuate a bit more. In other words, we call that opening it up to market forces, that the market will determine the value of the yuan. And so that's their argument, that they are not a currency manipulator because each year the currency value is affected more and more by the market. But again, it's all questionable. Now, the question I have, and I don't know why I haven't heard anyone else ask this, one of the benefits of holding a basket of currency, why doesn't everybody just hold US dollars and nothing else? Well, you hold a basket of currency so that you diversify your risk, right? You don't want to have all your money in euros in case something happens to the euro. You don't want to have all your money in the yen in case something happens to the yen. My question is, how do you call it diversification if you're holding dollars and yuan in the same basket, since the yuan is effectively pegged to the dollar? You're not really diversifying your risk by that much. And I don't hear anybody making that argument. I don't know why that argument hasn't been made. The other argument I would make is that if only 2% of central banks are willing to hold yuan, and if only a very small percentage of global trade is done in yuan, maybe we should just agree that the yuan is not an international currency. We should take it out of the basket of currencies. But that's for the IMF to decide. But I really would love to hear what some other economists feel about that issue. So the US dollar is the most traded currency in the world. Each day, $5.1 trillion of US currency are traded each day. So if China dumped all their currency in one day, okay, they have $1 trillion, just over $1 trillion. Basically, that one day would be a really good day for traders. They go, wow, trading volume is 20% higher. It's a record, 20% higher than it was yesterday. It's a record day. What an amazing day. And 10 years from now, they'll say, do you remember that day? That was an amazing day. And that's all it would be. It would be one amazing day of trading. Basically, if China dumped, the market for US debt is literally unlimited. If China dumped all the US debt on the market today, it would instantly get snapped up by central banks around the world. I would imagine that for that one day, the price is going to drop. It's going to go down that one day. But no, it's not going to crash the US dollar. I don't believe it would have long-term impact in the dollar. It is equal to 20% of one day's trading. It's not that much. So along with the issues associated with the yuan, nobody wants to hold it. So China issues debt in US dollars. Last year, China had a bad year, 2019. I believe that there was a general economic slowdown coming, and that there was a general economic slowdown last year in China, but the trade war exacerbated it. I think if the trade war hadn't happened, I think you still would have seen it slowing in China, just because the entire Chinese miracle, this great, increase, and and they're a global player, and they're buying this, and they're investing in that. It was all done with debt. China's public debt is over 300% of its GDP. Most people don't realize that. And again, there's a lot of self-loathing Americans, self-loathing media, foreign media who hate us, and they try and portray the US as the only country that has debt. No, actually, all countries have debt, and the US does not have the highest foreign debt or even the highest total debt. China has higher than the US. China's total public debt is more than 300% of GDP.